In 2001, Argentina trapped $60 billion of its citizens' money. An emergency decree locked away the savings of an entire nation to save the banks, but it ended up destroying a government in just 19 days. Welcome to Plexo. Saturday, December 1, 2001, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Cameras focused on a minister who, with a tense expression, announced the country's financial paralysis. Argentina's economy was bleeding. For months, fear had driven thousands of savers to withdraw their funds, pulling out stacks of $100 bills to hide in safe deposit boxes. The banking system, propped up by the illusion that 1 peso was worth exactly $1, was about to collapse from lack of liquidity. To stop this massive hemorrhage, the government made a drastic decision. Starting Monday, December 3, no one could withdraw more than 250 pesos, or $250 in cash per week. Payroll accounts, lifelong savings, and funds for medical emergencies were suddenly seized behind the teller windows. Citizens, used to handling cash in their daily routines, woke up in a country where their own money no longer belonged to them. The metal shutters of the banks came down, blocking access to physical bills. What the government presented as a temporary 90-day measure to calm the markets turned into a brutal financial trap. This decision suffocated the middle class, paralyzed street commerce, and lit the fuse of a social explosion unprecedented in South America. But the most disturbing part was yet to come. The measure had not trapped everyone equally. The architect of this extreme measure was Domingo Cavallo, the all-powerful economy minister. Cavallo had been called in to save the economic model he himself had created 10 years earlier. In his office at the ministry, with the air conditioning cranked up, the atmosphere felt like a pressure cooker. As he signed Decree 1570, which would go down in history as the Corralito, an almost ironic scene unfolded. The minister himself, responsible for forcing 36 million people to use electronic money, didn't know how to use a debit card to make a purchase. His team had to explain how the plastic card worked, revealing the huge disconnect between financial power and the reality on the streets. The limit of 250 pesos per week was not a random number. Initially, Cavallo had proposed a cap of 1,000 pesos, but executives from 2 major banks warned him that with that figure they would go bankrupt in less than a month. The government chose to protect corporate vaults, sacrificing families' liquidity. The informal economy, which accounted for nearly half of the country's income, came to a complete halt. Plumbers, taxi drivers, and small shopkeepers who only took cash lost their livelihoods overnight. No one had bills to pay, and banks became inaccessible fortresses, guarded by armed security. While the average citizen tried to figure out how to buy food without paper money, in the upper echelons of financial power, a very different game was being played, much faster and quieter. The official story said, the freeze was necessary to stop dollars from fleeing the country. But historical records show, the trap didn't close for everyone at the same time. Days before the decree took effect, leaks spread through the halls of power. While small savers slept soundly, trusting the system, a privileged elite emptied their accounts. Exactly 627 wealthy individuals and 230 companies managed to transfer their fortunes abroad just before operations were blocked. These last-minute transfers drained millions of dollars into tax havens and New York accounts. By the time bank doors finally shut on the general public, the big money was already gone. The wealthy had slipped out the back door, leaving the middle class trapped in a pen with no exit. Public outrage quickly boiled over. The streets of Buenos Aires filled with a deafening metallic clatter. Thousands of people banged dented pots and pans in front of banks, demanding their dollars back. They were retirees, employees, and shopkeepers who saw a lifetime of savings turned into frozen numbers on a screen. Bank managers hid in their offices while protesters plastered facades with insults and desperate pleas. Years of recession had built up a rage that finally found a physical target. The government, isolated in its capital offices, completely underestimated the fury of a people whose pockets had been picked. That fury was about to topple a presidency. On December 19, social tension hit a breaking point. Looted supermarkets, burning barricades, and violent clashes forced President Fernando de la Rúa to declare a state of siege. But instead of intimidating the population, the televised announcement acted like an accelerant. That same night, crowds marched on Plaza de Mayo, chanting in unison, "They all must go." Domingo Cavallo resigned in the early morning, but his departure was no longer enough to stop the institutional collapse. The next day, downtown Buenos Aires turned into a combat zone. Police repression left a tragic toll of 39 dead nationwide, marking one of the darkest days in Argentine democracy. Politically cornered, abandoned by his own party, and with the plaza a battlefield, the president handwrote his resignation. Then came the most brutal and symbolic image of the crisis. A white Sikorsky helicopter landed directly on the roof of the Casa Rosada. At 7:52 p.m. on December 20, de la Rúa climbed aboard and lifted off into the orange sky, escaping through the air while tear gas clouded the streets below. The sound of rotors cutting the wind sealed the end of a government that had tried to save the banks at the expense of its own people. In just 11 days, Argentina would have 5 different presidents, all adrift in an ocean of unpayable debt. The bank freeze outlasted every one of them. In early 2002, President Eduardo Duhalde took office and tried to calm the public with a phrase seared into national memory. Before the Legislative Assembly, he solemnly promised that anyone who had deposited dollars would get dollars back. It was a completely empty promise, one reality would shatter within weeks. The government ended convertibility, drastically devaluing the official currency. The Corralito evolved into something worse, known as the Corralón. Dollar savings were forcibly converted to pesos at a rigged exchange rate, wiping out the purchasing power of millions of families in hours. A saver with $100,000 in the bank suddenly found themselves with devalued pesos worth a fraction of their original effort. Argentina's financial system had socialized its losses, making ordinary citizens pay for the bailout of credit institutions. That mass confiscation left a scar that forever changed a country's relationship with its money. Today, distrust of banks persists, fueling the systematic purchase of foreign currency stashed under lock and key at home. Decree 1570 showed that a piece of paper signed in an office can ruin generations. That night, the line between state protection and legalized theft was erased. Decree 1570 didn't confiscate money, it confiscated the last ounce of faith holding up a country's illusion.